The Tales of Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny by Beatrix Potter and adapted by Cindy McKay. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. One day, Mother told them to go out and play. She told them to have fun. She told them to be good. "Now, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter," said old Mrs. Rabbit, "you may go down the lane to gather berries, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mr. McGregor." Flopsy went to pick berries. Mopsy went to pick berries. Cottontail went to pick berries too, but not Peter. Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden. He ate some carrots and French beans, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor saw Peter. He was very, very mad. Peter saw Mr. McGregor. He was very, very scared. Mr. McGregor jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. Peter ran and ran. He ran very fast. He ran so fast he lost his shoes. A bird found one, but it did not fit her. Peter might have gotten away if he had not run into a net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Peter had to hide. He jumped into a can. It was a good place to hide, but it was full of water. Mr. McGregor was sure that Peter was in the stool shed, perhaps underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking underneath each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter. He jumped out of the window. It was a very small window. It was too small for Mr. McGregor, so Mr. McGregor gave up. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. Peter began to cry. He wanted to go home, but he did not know how to get there. He tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where a white cat was staring at some goldfish. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Peter went back towards the tool shed and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. Peter saw Mr. McGregor. Behind Mr. McGregor was a gate. Behind the gate was the way home. Peter started running as fast as he could go. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up Peter's little jacket and shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter ran and ran. He ran all the way home. He lay down on the soft sand in his home, and Peter went to sleep. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a sandbank. Little Benjamin Bunny pricked his ears and listened to the trot of a pony. A carriage was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. Benjamin saw it go. Then he slid down the sandbank and hopped away. Benjamin went to call upon his relations, his aunt and cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. As he came around the back of the fir tree, he nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin Peter. Benjamin saw Peter. Benjamin said hello to Peter. Peter did not move. Peter did not look happy. He looked poorly and was dressed in a red handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who has got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The Scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and described how he has been chased about the garden, and had dropped his shoes and coat. Benjamin sat with Peter. He told him Mr. McGregor was not home. He told him Mr. McGregor was out for a ride. Peter hoped that it would rain on Mr. McGregor. Peter thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. So they went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and his shoes were plainly to be seen upon the Scarecrow. Benjamin jumped into the garden. Peter fell into the garden. But the garden was soft, so Peter was okay. Benjamin said he was in the habit of coming to the garden with his father to get lettuce for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. Then he suggested that they should fill Peter's red handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. But Peter did not want to listen. He did not want to be in the garden. He did not think that this was fun. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should like to go home. Benjamin, with a load of vegetables, led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden. Peter went with Benjamin, but he did not like it. Then Peter stopped. He would not move. He could not move. Peter saw a cat. Benjamin took one look. In half a minute, less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. The cat sniffed at the basket, then sat down upon the top of it. She stayed there for 5 hours. Peter wanted to go. Benjamin wanted to go, but the cat did not want to go. So they all stayed. At length, there was a pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny, young Benjamin's father, prancing along the top of the wall. He had come for his son. He had come for Peter. He jumped off the top of the wall. He jumped down on top of the cat. Old Benjamin Bunny cuffed the cat off the basket and kicked it into the greenhouse. When he had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he went to the basket, took out Benjamin and Peter, and marched them out of the garden. Mrs. Rabbit was happy to see Peter. She was happy to see his shoes and coat. She told Peter never to go there again, and Peter never did. The end.